Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Rivka.
And I'm Frank.
Before we get started, just a heads up to all the listeners, I am traveling and brought the wrong mic, so my audio's just coming straight from the computer. Apologies for that.
Raw dogging it right from the MacBook, but it sounds pretty good. But yes, Rivka, you are on vacay right now.
I am on vacay. I'm in your hometown area. I'm on the Jersey Shore.
Well, the area. You're not, I don't think you're anywhere near my hometown. But yeah, you're from my neck of the woods, I would say.
That's correct. Neck of the woods.
Yeah, Jersey shoring it up. How's it been so far?
It's been really beautiful. It's great. Apparently, well, there's been a little rain, but apparently it's got some, like, the really clear water happening right now.
Ooh.
Almost Caribbean, like Caribbean Jersey Shore happening. So yeah, I have been on a writing deadline, and so I haven't fully done vacation mode yet. But as of tomorrow, it's just the beach and a book, and I'm gonna finally listen to the Charlie XCX album.
Oh, yeah. I've been getting tons of recs. Everyone in my life is like, you have to listen to this album.
Yeah.
I was actually also in Jersey yesterday. We're recording this on the Sunday before this episode comes out. I went to Six Flags Great Adventure for a friend's birthday, and it was very fun. But as I told Rivka right before recording, I fucked up my back and went on some roller coasters, and now my back is even worse. So in a lot of pain right now, but we're here podcasting through it.
We're old. We're getting old. You know what's funny about that is actually one of the things that I was on deadline for in this scene. I don't know if it makes any sense, but I was just like writing this analogy for a younger character talking about going to Six Flags ironically. But I don't think that was your experience.
No. No, this was
just pure nostalgia.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my buddy wanted to ride a bunch of roller coasters, and you know what? We did it. And that's how good of a friend I am, is that I paid a physical price for it. Well, we had one thing we wanted to talk about before we get to our conversation on Snowpiercer. Some news that might seem innocuous to some people, but that I think is part of like a larger and scarier trend, which is last week it was announced that Paramount Global, like as in Paramount Studios and Paramount Plus, had removed the online archives to ComedyCentral.com, TVLand.com, MTVNews.com, and CMT.com from public access. So I'm pulling from a Deadline article here. It says the move takes away a quarter century or more of online content. It is unclear if the content has been saved for future use. In a statement, Paramount Global spokesperson said that the takedown came as part of a broader website strategy across Paramount. We've introduced more streamlined versions of our sites, driving fans to Paramount Plus to watch their favorite shows. But what critics of this are saying, and I think what is probably accurate, is that Paramount removed all of this content, effectively committed digital arson to this content, which is something we've talked about before, as a way to save on their tax burden.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
There it is.
Yep, there it is. There it is. This is something we've been seeing more and more of in the last few years. I forget which studio it is, but the movie Batgirl, which we've talked about. Fully filmed, fully produced, ready to go, and whichever studio it was that produced it was like, actually, this property, this film is more valuable to us dead than released. So all of the work of the writers, the actors, director, all the craftspeople, all the production people, just gone. Absolutely, just torched.
Some of whom their only access to that work may have been through that archive, because it's not like everyone's, IP. It's not like everyone's getting their work when they finished working on it, because we're just alienated workers in a larger system,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not like they're like, hey, here's a copy for you guys for fun. It's like, no, it's like, this, you'll never get this. This belongs to us. Maybe you could like come in and watch a screening of it, but like other than that, you're not getting it. Similarly happened to the movie Coyote versus Acme that Will Forte, I think, had written and directed, or like he was a part of it. But this is something we're seeing because, now that these entertainment companies and tech companies have all conglomerated into these giant multinational cyclopean conglomerates of entertainment apparati, their accounting team or whoever at some point was like, hey, you know what? Actually, we could save on taxes or whatever if we just started destroying content, just remove it, because if we get rid of it, then we can claim that it is a loss in the eyes of, the IRS or whatever the tax loophole is. is. So Paramount Global hasn't come out and said this is why they did that, but in the piece it pointed out that Paramount Global has been in financial straits, facing declining revenue in its traditional TV business as Paramount Plus, while growing rapidly, remains in the red. So everyone kind of read this as like, oh, the executives at Paramount made the decision that it would be more financially beneficial to their bottom line of ever-increasing profits to just destroy all this stuff. And this is like I said, this is like a ton of stuff from Comedy Central. This is a ton of stuff from MTV. It's...
You know what, man? Gotta do what you gotta do.
Oh, it's Rivka's finance bro character. Does he have a name?
Mac was the first best thought that came to me. So I think we're going to go with Mac.
Mac's good.
Mac's good. And Mac's also on the Jersey Shore on vacation. So watch out.
Oh, shit.
Uh-oh.
Lord, watch out for him.
Yeah. He says some shit, but like on the Jersey Shore, I feel like Mac knows. He's like, I'm not a good guy, but I do what I gotta do. It's the system.
Sure.
Like, I honestly feel like Mac would vote for Bernie on the Jersey Shore just like for the summer and then take it back.
Yeah. Like on the Jersey Shore, he's like a man of the people. He gets it, but then he goes back to work in the finance district and just like makes decisions that only immiserate the working class.
Totally. Although speaking of, the Trump flags have been out.
Oh, I'm sure they have.
Not as many as I anticipated, but they're out.
I'm sure they have.
And they look budget AF.
Well, yeah, some of them are making them on their own, you know? No joke, there's a guy in my hometown who just tables on, like, the main street with his own handmade Trump flags and sells them. Last time I was home, my brother was like, "Do you see the guy at the Trump flags?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was weird." And he was like, "Yeah, he's there every day. Like, that's his job."
We're fucked because no one's like, remember when they had those the last time around? It was like the beans for Joe, cup of Joe.
Oh,
Did you get those
whatever.
beans?
I don't think I got any of them, but yeah.
Our dear friend sent me them, ironically.
That's right.
So no one's like hand making or home brewing like cup of Joe beans.
Well, no, of course. No one, and it's, no one gives a shit about Joe. No one is motivated by Joe. If anything, Joe is inspiring people to stay the fuck home and not vote because all he is showing them is that politics don't fucking do anything for their lives. So if there was someone who actually inspired like a progressive populist, I think we would see more of that. Maybe not someone who's like, I'm gonna sit here every day and sell my own Bernie flags or something, but
listen, Jersey Shore Mac doesn't even know there's an election coming up. So moving on.
Anyway, back to the
global conglomerate.
While getting rid of this content might seem innocuous and why you might not care about, Comedy Central or MTV or TV Land or CMT, this is pop cultural history. And I don't want to use the word content because we hate that term because it reduces art to its merest commodity form.
Well, honestly, though, it's like when you use the term content, you're like, yeah, you can get rid of it. Like it minimizes it to the point where, as you said, you can commit arson on it. And you're like, but it's just content.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just content. It's not art. It's not
something people labored over to like
some
write
people,
and create.
Yep.
Oh my God.
It's not important media, especially in the case of like Comedy Central, like troves of like Daily Show stuff gone. So this is something that can happen to even more culturally important art at some point if someone deigned it to be so. So it's just another example of how these companies just like show their ass in that their function is not to create high-quality art and entertainment and media for their customers. Their function is to maximize profit for their shareholders at all costs, no matter what it takes. So
that's it.
Just keep an eye out for stuff like this, because sadly, I think we'll end up seeing more and more of it in the coming years.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Mac, get out of here, Mac. All right, well, that was all I wanted to touch on. So, you want to get to our conversation? Snowpiercer?
Let's do it.
It was just the
it's
two of
a
us.
little bit more hopeful than this. This was that was some depressing. It was good, depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the two of us, so we'll transition and you'll have more of this.
Yeah, it's just the two of us for this one. We want to do more of these where it's just the two of us getting to talk about movies that we want to talk about sometimes. And this was a great conversation. But before we do that, just want to remind our audience that we don't sell ads on this show. We donate our ad space to leftist or progressive organizations. Instead, we rely on community support to keep the show going. And if you want to do that, you can subscribe to our Patreon.
That's right. For just $5 a month, you get access to new bonus episodes and our entire back catalog. Our Patreon link is in the episode description in your podcast player, or you can find it at mvcpod.com. Also, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes, and you help boost our algorithms so people get more of this content.
We gotta give them the content. All right, we're gonna take a break, but we'll be right back with our conversation about Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer. Hey everyone, we've got an amazing organization we want to tell you about called Anti-Capitalism for Artists.
Anti-Capitalism for Artists is an education-based community dedicated to raising the class consciousness of artists.
Their core offering, the 10-week Intro to Anti-Capitalism course, is designed to be accessible to anyone looking to get familiar with a wide range of anti-capitalist concepts and ideas.
They do this by offering an eclectic array of free virtual and in-person events year-round, geared to meet all manner of knowledge backgrounds. Frank and I both took the course in different cohorts, and it really was amazing. You get to meet with a group of people who are interested in anti-capitalism, you build solidarity, and it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah, they put together such an amazing, comprehensive reading list from anti-capitalist writers from all different types of tendencies, from Marx to black radicalism to intersectional feminism to queer liberation to modern-day anti-capitalists. So you really get a firm grounding in a diverse and wide array of concepts.
Artists of all kinds, abilities, and professional statuses are welcome to join A4A's community, where they can learn, build community, and co-create their own events and offerings.
You can learn more, reach out, or support their work by donating at anticapitalismforartists.com or find them on Instagram at anticapitalismforartists.
Love you, comrades. Now back to the show.
All right, we're here. It is Rivka and I together solo, or I guess when there's two of us, it wouldn't technically be solo.
Were that enmeshed in your brain, Frank?
Yeah. We just count as one at this point. So we wanted to do more of these episodes where it's just the two of us talking about a movie, and I realized that neither of us have ever gotten the chance to choose a movie. So for this first one, I said to Rivka, ladies first, so you can choose the movie we're gonna watch.
Because that's how we roll.
Yes, obviously. You know, this is as woke of a podcast as you can get. So, Riv, what movie are we talking about today?
Okay, so I chose the movie Snowpiercer. We'll do our usual format, and then I'll tell you why. Snowpiercer came out in 2013, was directed by Bong Joon-ho, written by Bong Joon-ho and Kelly Masterson, based on the French graphic novel Les Trains Bernesièges.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad.
Les Trains Bernesièges. Bernesièges.
Oh, yours is good, yeah. By Jacques Loeb, Benjamin Legrand, and Jean-Marc Rochette. Starring Chris Evans, Song Kang-ho, Tilda Swinton, Jamie Bell, Octavia Spencer, Go Ah-sung, John Hurt, and Ed Harris. The budget for this movie was $40 million. It had a global box office of $86.8 million, and a brief synopsis. Set in a future where a failed climate change experiment has killed all life except for the survivors who boarded the Snowpiercer, a train that travels around the globe. The train is divided by class, with the elite in the front and the poor in the tail section, and the story follows Curtis, a tail section passenger who leads a revolution to take control of the engine and the train.
A little bit of historical context for when this film was released. It was released in South Korea in 2013 and then the US in June 2014, which is, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that it was originally an international release. But what's going on here in the US? Barack Obama is the president. 2014 was recorded as the hottest year globally since records began in 1880. This marked the beginning of a trend, with recent years continually breaking temperature records. The United States and Cuba reestablished diplomatic relations after 50 years. The largest Ebola outbreak in history hit West Africa, especially Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, becoming a global health crisis. On August 9th, 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed by police officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, sparking massive protests. And avocado toast is all the rage, and Happy by Pharrell Williams is blasting on the radio. Wow, that immediately transports me back, hearing that this was the year of Happy.
I knew it would. I felt like as I was putting those in, I was like, this will put in context the year.
Yeah, all of the other things, I was like, where was I? What was I doing? And as soon as you said Happy, I was like, oh, yep, I know exactly what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, Riv, why did you choose Snowpiercer to talk about on this podcast?
So we've gotten a lot of requests for this movie. So that was probably number one. I'm here to please. um, and I wasn't sure if I had seen it. And I thought I had, but then I was like, I don't think I had.
Oh, wow.
And
so this is your first time?
I think so. But 2014 was a strange year in my life. So who knows,
Sure.
But it definitely felt like a first time, and love Bong Joon-ho. We also covered Parasite. So yeah, that's kind of, I was like, this is going to be right on theme, the perfect choice for this podcast.
Okay. So,
and I also wanted to watch something kind of, fun, thrillery.
Mm-hmm.
That was my choice. I had a little decision paralysis. I was like, oh, this is what we put our guests through.
Yeah. As soon as I said it was your choice, you were like, oh, I don't want to pick.
I was like, oh, choose something.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm like, choose for me. Okay. But I did a good job because this movie is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
I said to you right before we started recording, I was like, I'm a little overwhelmed because I feel like there's so much. But you calm me down and you're like, there is so much, but it's also kind of simple. Like I think the structure is great.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a good time talking through it. So those were my reasons.
All great reasons. I'm very glad that you picked this movie. This feels like a movie that was made for this podcast specifically.
That's why they made it, actually.
Yeah.
I found an article.
Yeah. Bong Joon-ho was like, I'm pretty sure in a decade, these two recent theater grads are going to start an anti-capitalist movie podcast. But I agree with everything that you said. I remember seeing this movie, I think, around when it came out, probably around 2014, 2015. And I was like fucking blown away by it. I mean, I remember definitely grasping its politics at the time and maybe being one of the first stories that I had seen that was one of the first movies that I remember seeing that is explicitly about class. Where like the main driving narrative plot force in this movie is class. And I mean 2014, 2015, what am I? We're like in our mid-20s. So I'm seeing that and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that is fucked up." But not yet having like a where we are now, where we have more of like, let's say a Marxist materialist analysis of the class-based system. Other than that, I was like, this movie just fucking rules. You see these fight scenes? Oh my god, dude, so sick when they're fighting in slow-mo in the dark with the torches. Fucking awesome. So unreal. And clearly Bong Joon-ho is very interested in class. This is a theme that recurs in his filmmaking between this and Parasite, and I actually can't remember his other films off the top of my head, but this is something that he's very interested in, and he finds incredible. The Host, yeah. Oh my god, I don't remember The Host. I remember seeing The Host, but I don't really remember the plot of The Host. But he is so incredible, and obviously this is based on a graphic novel, but like finding ways to manifest class antagonisms and class conflict in a way that is both politically informed and politically motivated, but is also just like great storytelling and great filmmaking. His marriage of the two, his marriage of style and substance is like unparalleled in a lot of ways. There aren't a ton of directors who, in my opinion, really marry style and substance in a way where you're like, one, I'm like, the themes are so strong, the messaging is so strong, but at the same time, I am fucking entertained as hell. Like just like popping popcorn into my mouth, like, let's go, this movie rules.
Yeah.
And revisiting it, I was like, yep, this all holds up. I mean, maybe not every single part of it holds up. I know you have some thoughts on a certain monologue about baby eating, which will...
Yeah, but since full disclosure, we were out for drinks with friends last night. So we were like, let's not talk about it. But we were baited into like a little bit of talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when martini in, I'm like, my thoughts back. But yes, once we get to that, I slept on it and I have some new feelings and thoughts.
On the movie as a whole, or that monologue?
On Chris Evans playing Curtis Everett and the cannibalism baby monologue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, I mean, just like right off the bat, this movie just starts just starts with a bang. You know, we get a little bit of the voiceover about what happened with, you know, this climate catastrophe and this like eternal winter. And then the first scene is we're in the tail section. All of the tail section passengers are on the ground. There are men with guns around, like basically treating them like fucking chattel. We see Curtis, played by Chris Evans, looking at the doors in front of him. And he's Chris Evans' character Curtis is standing when they tell everyone to sit down, and we learn that he's counting the doors and the timing of the doors in front of him. So right off the bat, you're just inundated with information, but it's all practical information that tells you so much about this world and the class structure that has been set up, but also tells you about these characters in the tail section and how they obviously are like have always been plotting their escape or some form of a revolution.
Yeah, it's true. It's remarkable how much is set up. You also learn from the voiceover, it's the year 2031, which by the way is like, what, 7 years from now?
Yep.
And you learn that the world was getting too hot. And so in order to balance it out, they had to make it cooler with, I can't remember what some substance that they put in the air. I'm sure some company was making a lot of money off of selling whatever that substance was. Then they cooled, the earth gets too cold, as they're told, for humankind to exist. And so that's part of the context or how they ended up on this kind of Noah's Ark of a train that's just moving around the globe over and over and over, really with no destination.
Yes, and the whole idea that this is the last of humanity on this train, and the importance of, you know, continuing the human race and having the human race survived is all wrapped up in, you know, what takes place within this train, and that's used throughout the film, is used as a justification for the upper class passengers and the fucking fascists who run this train to justify their brutal treatment of the tail section passengers, which is something we see in the real world when imperial forces are like, well, we have to go in and kill all these people. How else are we going to maintain order if we don't? Like, they're the ones not following the rules, so we have to go in and just absolutely oppress the shit out of these people and murder them.
Totally. And I love that we have this, like, the visual of the train just endlessly moving around. It feels like this false sense of progress and growth, but like it's really going nowhere. There's no destination. Like it's just this endless sort of like idea of growth, and it's progressing towards nowhere. And that to me is capitalism being driven by, you know, accumulate, driven by profit. To what end? Like there is no end. It felt like the perfect metaphor for capital and capitalism. And I like that you have this. I love that the shots of the train from the exterior, it looks like a prison. Like everyone's in this prison, and then inside we get the class systems, but you just have such clarity of the systemic structure, like the physical systemic structure that the story is being told inside of.
Yes.
Which is very, like, this whole thing is like 100%. I was like, this is Marxism.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
There's such clarity in the systems and clarity in the contradictions that those systems bring about, which I love. I thought this movie was filled with contradiction, and that's sort of like where I'm at in my learning right now. I'm like really big in the contradiction phase. So seeing a movie that just portrays those in the human beings, but also in the landscape, like the first number one contradiction is the fact that, like, in order to combat climate change, we went from super hot to super cold. And the visuals in this film are all that of like dark and light, the bigger contradictions. And then of course, coming from that is this class contradiction of the elite versus the working class in the back of the train. So this movie, like you were saying, he's so brilliant at being able to portray the material contradictions, but also the contradictions of these systems and the things that result from that, but then capture it in the visual format. Every frame has dark, light, snow, fire, someone who's standing, someone who's lower. Like, it's an incredible visual language, and none of it's accidental. It's all intentional.
Absolutely. I mean, and just to reiterate, like, using a train and using something that we're all familiar with, which is like a class-based ticketing system. You know, we see this on airplanes as well, but using that as the story device to manifest class in this actual material way that you understand, where it's like the front of the train, that's where the rich people are. The back of the train, this is where the poor people are. And, we don't see the front of the train for a little while, but we see the back of the train. We see the conditions that these people are living in immediately, and it looks like a fucking slum,
Right. And this story is told from the back to the front. The story is about class revolution. It's about the revolt of the proletariat, and it could never be told from the front to the back. And it's so important that it's told that way, because I think a lot of films we've seen that try and tell stories of revolution but start from the elite perspective, and like, this is so successful, and like you said, it starts with the leader of this revolution looking forward towards the progressive goal and trying to make a plan for revolt.
And as an audience member, you immediately understand what this class system could feel like. Specifically, if you've ever flown on an airplane, and unless you are super rich and you have flown first class your entire life, usually you are walking through the classes of the airplane when you get on. You have to walk through first class, you have to walk through business class, all the way back to the poor people section in the back, not even the poor people section, all the way back to just like the cheapest section, which is still wildly expensive because airlines are fucking criminal organizations. But I mean, I have a pet theory. It's not probably anything original, but I think that, people hate the modern airfare experience and air travel, not just because the seats are uncomfortable and, they're cramming us in there as like fucking sardines, and they clearly just are like treating us like meat the more meat that they can pack into a plane, the higher their margins are going to be. But not only that, it's a manifestation of class, and people who might not have like a full class politics might like get on a plane and be like, man, why does being on a plane make me fucking feel like shit every single time? Because you're literally walking. You're like, oh, I couldn't afford to live this nicely. I couldn't afford to live even this nicely. I can only afford to be stuffed in the back like meat.
Damn, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
I think you're so onto something, because we see so many videos of like all the shit that you see going down is on a plane. And it tells us so much about how we look at conflict under capitalism, right? We're always like, that's because that person's crazy, that person's racist, that person's angry. Those things might all be true, but you're so right. Like, they're stuck inside of like the Snowpiercer, essentially. And that kind of antagonism, when you've been sort of living in the illusion, trying to deny the class structures, particularly in America, and like, oh, I can just go on and pretend that I'm like not part of the proletariat because I have my iPhone and whatever other accessories make me feel above. And then you get onto this fucking train and it's like smack in your face. That's brilliant, Frank.
Oh, thank you so much. I hate the airlines so much. So right off the bat, we're shown the conditions of these tail section passengers. We're shown the totalitarian fascist regime that are literally brutalizing them with guns. It's like very, SS Gestapo vibes. And one of the first things that happen that kind of instigates and lights a spark for this revolution to take place now is the police, let's say, we'll call them, kidnap all of the tail section passenger children. Or maybe just some of them, but they take a handful of them.
They're looking for the smallest.
They're looking for the smallest kids, and they don't say why, and we don't understand, and we obviously, as the audience, aren't understanding that there's something really, horrific or nefarious behind this. But this is kind of like the instigation for the story to jump off. And one of the fathers of one of the children gets in an altercation, hits someone with a shoe, and then his punishment is that they open a small window to the train and stick his arm outside until it freezes off. So right off the bat, we're being shown like these people in the tail section have little to no agency, little to no control, and they are constantly subjected to this absolutely horrific violence that is coming from the upper classes. And then this is when we get introduced to Tilda Swinton's character, which, man, I gotta say, Tilda, one of the best to ever do it. She's just like...
so brilliant. One of the best to ever do it.
One of the best to ever do. Like, every time I see her in something, I'm like, she's doing completely different things in almost every performance, and she is so good, so grounded, but also so absurd at the same time, and so funny. Like her comedic timing is so good, along with being like one of our greatest dramatic actresses.
And she has so much clarity in what story she is telling.
Yes.
And she often, we saw her, I think another movie we covered that she was in was Michael Clayton. And she played a similar, like an elitist character who was enforcing an order, a rule for the ruling class. But
such a different take on that. But I think she just knows so clearly the role that she's playing in the story. And I think that allows her freedom in her character, but it always makes so much sense. Nothing she's doing, like you said, it feels grounded. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is someone just having fun. Like,
No,
you know, and you see performances like that.
No, there's an ideology behind it. There, I mean, and she articulates it in her first speech. This is not a shoe, this is disorder speech. And this is something that we'll hear throughout this movie, which is, you tail section passengers just don't understand. Like, we're doing this, we are brutalizing you for the sake of humanity. We have to keep order. We have to strike a balance. And if you step out of line, that's you not understanding what your place is. She says, on this train of life, we all remain in our allotted station, our preordained position. And then she puts, just in such a cruel turn, she puts the shoe on the guy's head whose arm is literally freezing. And she's like, would you wear a shoe on your head? No, you wouldn't. You'd wear a hat. I am a hat. You are a shoe. Be a shoe. And it's silly, but it's so clear. This is what I was saying before. It's just like everything is so clear and so simple. This idea that, we are the hats, you are the shoes. These are our places. Order must be kept. And if you step out of line as the shoe, it's actually not in your best interest for you to not want to be brutalized and murdered and have your kids stolen. It's actually in your best interest and in all of our best interest if you just put your fucking head down and just take these beatings and whatever we do to you, because we're doing it for the greater good.
Yeah, this first scene and this first section sets up so much. One of the big themes in this movie is the war, obviously the class war, but also the war between idealism and this ideology and these concepts that the ruling class use to keep people in place. Like you shared, order is that barrier that holds us back from the frozen death. And then materialism, which is like the actual reality of things. So this one big lie is that the outside will kill you. And as the film progresses, the revolutionaries start to put together pieces, small pieces that actually materially they're being told that might be a lie. Mm-hmm. Right? You have and we'll get into this, one of the best scenes is when they realize that there are no bullets in the guns, that there's all this illusion, this ideological illusions being used to keep people in their place. And then the biggest one being that, like, actually maybe the outside is habitable for life. And this lie that the outside will kill you is being used to keep us in these class systems, keep us in this train.
Yep.
So I think that Tilda's character, Minister Mason, is the mouthpiece for that ideology in her opening speech and putting the guy's arm out to see, look, that you can't live outside. I mean, just because you put someone's arm out of a speeding train in cold weather, like
at nighttime.
Yeah, that's not necessary. At nighttime, like, yeah, it's gonna freeze off. That doesn't necessarily mean that the outside is inhabitable, but this is the power of these ideological forces. And it's why, you people would have frozen if it wasn't for Wilford. So this is keeping people in their place, but simultaneously Curtis Everett is putting those pieces together, and he's starting to get a sense, because in that scene she has that small giveaway where she says, oh, put down your useless guns, and no one else catches it, but he starts to catch on, like, why is she saying useless guns? I don't think there's bullets in those guns. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful. And then before we move on to the next piece, which I think continues on from here, the setup of the children I thought was really interesting, because the way it's introduced, I don't know about you, but when I was watching that, I'm like, ugh, gross. Like,
oh yeah, like
of course.
Child sex slaves, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, which again, not say there's all kinds of exploitation, but it's like, this is, I think, is really interesting, because the fear of children being used for sexual purposes, and we see that ideology being used in the right wing pretty successful. Hillary Clinton has these kids in the bottom of a pizza place or whatever that shit is, Jeffrey Epstein. Not saying that those aren't like realities, but I think it was so smart to play on that for the audience to be like, ugh, like, gross. That's what's happening. And what we find out at the very end is that Wilford is exploiting these children to keep the engine of the train moving. So there's this stunning scene at the end where they lift up the bottom of the train and they find the child in the engine, in the fire, in the heat, running this train that's supposed to be this miracle train, but it's just tale as old as time. It's child labor. It's what Marxist capital is all about. It always comes down to the most vulnerable, which are children, are doing the hardest labor, are making these things happen. And it was just, I thought it was a great juxtaposition that the whole time you're kind of thinking, well, maybe he's a creepy groomer. Maybe he's, no, it's like, it's the answer under capitalism is usually always so obvious and inevitable.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
he's using it to run his fucking engine.
That's such a good point. You're absolutely right. Because they could have gone like the child sexual exploitation route, and that would have been, equally horrific. But you're right. The choice to have the kids being used as the literal lifeblood of keeping the whole fucking system moving is so much more thematically in line with the story that he was telling. And yeah, you're right. It's complete.
And that final image is like right out of Soviet art. It's like right out. You've seen, it's not like a new image that he's using. You're like, oh, I've seen this throughout Capital's history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of Wilford, this is also right in this, first act where we start hearing about Wilford. So Wilford is the inventor of the train, the creator of the train, the person who brought us all together on this arc that will preserve humanity. And Tilda's character is like very much like she's drunk the Kool-Aid. Like she believes this shit. And we start hearing about Wilford almost as if he's a god, almost as if he's the Messiah who has saved them all. And I think this is a very strong on the nose metaphor for the way that we idolize capitalists in our society, just like the brilliant, unbelievable, superhuman, almost godlike capitalists, these billionaires, like we've heard it the way that people talk about Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or Donald Trump or like anyone who has found themselves at the top of this capitalist system must just be better humans than the rest of us. They must be smarter, better, stronger, more talented, faster, more like sharper, better business acumen, better street smarts. They're better than us because they have found themselves at the top of this system. And, if you interrogate that even for like a second, you realize, oh no, it's just built on exploitation and accumulation. And they're just someone who happened to be at the top of the org chart at some company that ended up exploiting enough people to make them billionaires. It's the same argument you could apply to kings and queens of the feudal society, like, were there decent, smart, good kings and queens? Sure. Yeah, whatever. But did all of them end up in their position solely because of, winning the biological lottery? Almost always. So it really dispels the myth that these people, these capitalists, are somehow just more, they're special. They're special and they're better than the rest of us.
Well, and it's really interesting that when we learn more about Wilford, the history of Wilford was exactly, I was thinking about Elon Musk, like, oh, he was this sort of inventor that he was talking about his train. Like he wanted to do this train around the world before the climate catastrophe. And everyone's like, no. People were just kind of like, no, I don't, that it wasn't like making sense. It wasn't clicking for society, because I guess the idea being like it was probably late stage capitalism, but there was still some remnants of a society that pushed back. And then he takes advantage, like a good climate capitalist does, of this catastrophe and is able to advance this train idea, which is not a great train. Like, really, that's the best they could offer? I have so many questions about the train, so we might derail ourselves for a moment to just go through the mechanics. Yeah, that was good. The mechanics of the train, because if this is the best, like Wilford is this brilliant guy. Like, obviously you're like, no, your fucking idea is as old as time. It runs on children. Children are making this brilliant like train keep moving.
Yeah, runs on labor and blood, literally.
Can I just ask, because we do get through the entirety of the train.
Yeah. Through
the journey, we move from the back. Where the fuck is everyone sleeping?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Where, if you have to, like in the I guess bourgeois class, because we know that like as the further up you get, the more access you have to different parts of the train. I wasn't really clear what they're eating, like the bourgeois, like, because there was the only restaurant we saw was one tiny sushi bar.
Oh, that's right, the sushi bar in the aquarium.
There's no hallways, like, so in order to get to, like, let's say the hot tub car, do you have to walk through the nightclub in order to get to school? Are the kids walking through the like the drug-addled nightclub. Like, there were so many questions I had about the train.
That is a really, yeah, I had that thought as well. It's like, so you have to walk through, yeah, you have to get through every single, I have to walk through the Great Gatsby if I want to, like, go eat dinner. Like, what's going on? I mean, I think we can assume that we didn't see every single car on the train, because when they show that exterior of the train, that's like, I don't know, 100 cars,
Yeah.
if not more. And I think we probably see about like, what, 20, 25, 30 cars
that's
maybe
fair.
total. So I think they're just like, yeah, we can't show you we don't have time to go through every single car.
Fair, but still, how are they passing without having this? Like, there's not a hallway or like I maybe would have like created like an above. I don't know.
No,
but it's
you're
very
right.
small.
You're right. If this,
And
if
I
this
guess
was,
that's the
if this
point,
was a
is like it's
practical,
not well designed.
Yes, no, you're right. If this was an actual practical design, you wouldn't be walking through the actual space of what each car is. There would be some sort of like hallway space, and then you would like see, like, the hallway would be on like one side or the other, and then you would see like, oh, in there is the hot tubs, like, oh, in there is the club, like, but you'd be able to you'd be able to walk past without actually like having to enter into the space. But for the sake of what they're doing in this movie, that's an uninteresting narrative choice, you know? Like, it's
But it's also another great metaphor for capitalism of like, oh, look, we have all of these choices because like they've bought into this lie of there's no other option. You have to be on this train. This is what Wilford said. Like, this saved you. There's no other option. That people are like, this is the best we could have done. This is the best design. And it's like all around, there's like many, even for the bourgeoisie, like faulty things with this train. I just think it's a great metaphor for like innovation under capitalism. Like, look at our fucking, like, the shit that we're like, this is the top notch, the best you can get. Like, our planes are fucking falling out of the sky. Like,
Yep.
Boeing is the best that we can get. Like, under capitalism, but they're like, nope, because there's no other alternative. Like, that's how they keep us in that system. I think that's kind of one of the major points of this movie is like, you will have to buy into that this is top-notch technology because there's no other alternative, because the other alternative, socialism, will get you frozen. Communism, you're gonna freeze out there. So you might as well be on this fucking one-deck train where, yeah.
And we also see that, you know, being a first-class passenger on this train doesn't mean that you are immortal. You know, there's the scene near the end where, I don't know the character's name, but the guy who's like, you know, the heavy like killer that works for Wilford, who's, you know, like a really good shot and fighter and everything. When he's trying to find Curtis and Namgoon in the sauna, and he shoots one of the first-class passengers and kills them, and then the soldier's like, you just shot a first-class passenger, and then he kills the soldier. But that's an example of how, you know, yes, first class is a more privileged and luxurious position, but if the system necessitates for you, the first-class passenger, to die in order for the system to maintain itself, then guess what? That'll happen. Even some of the most wealthy capitalists are, if the system necessitated their destruction, it will, and it does. So
yes,
everyone is vulnerable at one point or another.
And it's such an important contradiction, but the reason for noticing those contradictions between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie is to also find the solution. And you're like, the bourgeoisie would not be the bourgeoisie very much in this case without the first car working class, like the proletariat of this train, because without them, who is Minister Mason going to point to and say, see how good you have it? Because once they're gone, once they're eliminated, they don't have it well. Like, this is not actually a good train for anyone. Nobody is living a great life. They can just, the only reason it's great is because they're pointing to all the external threats that are actually revealed to be not threats.
Yes.
What I really appreciate about this film too is that it's just articulating that class war and revolution is inherently probably going to necessarily be violent, right? Could you imagine watching this movie and like the back of the train being like, we're going to do a silent protest to the front of the train? That's how we're going to get to the engine. We're going to silently walk in peace. It's just, it articulates how the system doesn't allow for that. And there's a quote from the Communist Manifesto: the development of modern industry produces above all its own gravediggers, so that the bourgeoisie inside of that is producing its own gravediggers.
Yes. And something that they bring up is that there have been revolutions in the past, you know, like that this is a constant conflict that has, you know, bubbled up from time to time because these class antagonisms and these contradictions are so strong. And I think that's such important context, and one that like didn't need to be included, but I think is such an important detail to show that no, these conditions are going to create, like you're saying, capital's own gravediggers. It's going to make the people that are under the boot of everyone else want to fight back, want to start a revolution. The other thing it does, which I think is very valuable as, as for leftists, for anyone that harbors revolutionary optimism, is that not all revolutions are successful. And that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Very important. This is why I feel like the director and writers clearly knew their marks. It's crucial that we know that there was a bunch of revolts that failed and that everyone is sort of trying and learning and getting better. Like, that is how contradiction in this case breeds the progress. And we see how this revolt that we're following in real time, it has lots of forward momentum and then backwards, and things that it has wins and wins and losses. That's how it progresses through this train. It's also what makes it fucking compelling as movie and like great action sequences.
Yeah, and it all compounds one another. Just because there was an unsuccessful revolution doesn't mean that every revolution will be unsuccessful. And in fact, we can learn things from the previous attempts, and must learn things. And these stories galvanize people to know that there is a way, there is a chance, like we can actually fight back. Okay, so then we go on. Now we're just like moving through the train, and then there's like a small period where they take Tilda Swinton captive, and she's basically she's gonna guide them through the train so that they don't actually have to fight their way all the way through.
Can I just pause to ask you, she makes this choice, and I feel like I was like, I'm missing, this gotta mean something. It was a great choice. But she's like, after they take her captive and she's like pleading with Curtis, and she basically reveals to Curtis, like, we know who you are, we've been tracking you. And then she pulls out her dentures and she's like, good. She's like, good. Whoa. Did that have a deeper meaning? I was like, what? I can't stop thinking about it. Was there a meaning for that, or is that just a character choice?
That might just be a character choice. I don't know. Maybe she's trying to show her vulnerability. She's trying to like give off grandma vibes so that Curtis doesn't kill her. That's the most.
Maybe
I got
maybe she was trying to show him, like, maybe it was just like a way of being like, see, making herself look more vulnerable. Like in those cases, there was trying to be like, no, I'm like you. Look, I don't have teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also flawed. I also have problems.
Yeah. We don't actually have a dentist up in first class because our fucking brilliant leader forgot to bring the doctors with us.
Mm-hmm. So then we're like moving through the train. We meet Paul the cook, who was a tail section passenger who was kidnapped at some point and then was made the cook of the train, or probably the cook for the tail section passengers. And he's sort of like, he's been alone for, let's say, 15 years. So he's kind of like lost his mind a little bit and is just sort of like muttering to himself. But he's representative of someone who has just been so broken by the system. And something he keeps saying is, my place is here, my place is here, my place is here. So like this idea that either through conditioning, propaganda, or just like psychological torture or abuse, people will accept their conditions. And, and in some cases they're like, well, as shitty as this is, it'll probably be a lot worse if I try to fight for something better. If I try to fight for something better, then the people in charge might make things even worse for me. And the risk of that is enough to keep me in my place.
Yeah. And in this train, they're making the jello-y looking slabs of
protein bars
that the first car eats, like lives off. That's all they've been allowed to eat. And then it's revealed that it's like this bug juice mixture, which I'll be honest, like when that was revealed, okay, I'm gonna be honest, I was like, I want to try one of those. I like the texture of that. It looks like,
sure,
it was very appealing to me. Which
yeah, it kind of looked like a fruit roll-up situation. Yeah. I wasn't mad at it.
And also I was like, well, bugs are like, that's not the word, like at least they're getting protein.
Yeah, bugs are good protein. There are a lot of cultures that still eat bugs, for sure.
But I feel like Curtis was like, when he saw it, was like, I was like, dude.
Bro, you ate babies. Like,
you ate babies.
This shouldn't be that shocking to you.
Based on his reaction, I was like, oh, okay, that's not like, I thought it was going to be like you're eating the feces of like the upper class. That would have been a little bit more horrific.
That's a good idea. That's a good.
The bugs, I was like, I'm pretty sure
note.
people eat bugs, and those bugs are big and juicy, and like this looks like an interesting consistency. I would like to try one.
Also, another train design nitpick, like, where are these bugs coming from? Like, this is a closed...
Where are these bugs coming from?
This is a closed ecosystem. It's not like bugs can get onto the train at any point. So, like, these are the bugs. These are the offspring of the bugs that came onto the train 17 years ago. Like, I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
And they have to be reproducing so rapidly. Like, I
Yeah.
guess you're right. We're just gonna go with the logic of like we didn't see a lot of these cars that they journeyed through.
Yeah, maybe there's a bug car. Maybe there's just like like a topiary just for bugs, and they're just harvesting bugs from there. It's possible. So they continue their journey through all the different cars. At some point, the cops show up again. We find out that they do have bullets. They've just been saving them for a time like this. And then there's the great pitched battle in the dark where they bring out their night vision goggles. And but really fast, I did love the moment when Curtis when they have their guns pointed at them, and he just runs up to the front, grabs the barrel of a gun, puts it against his head, and pulls the trigger. And then it just turns around. He's like, "They've got no bullets."
Oh, it was so good. It was so good. It was such a great moment of like, wait, it's all a fucking like go. It's alive.
It's all fucking
Freedom.
alive.
It was so.
I thought it was also great character development for Curtis, because he's like, I am willing to die. I'm fucking willing to die if it means that we have a shot of getting out of this place.
Yep.
So then, but then the cops do show up again with bullets. Very sad. Or maybe the dark battle is before. Doesn't matter. And the other thing we haven't really talked about is that I'd say 30% of this movie is like dialogue and plot and, all of these themes that we're talking about. And then like 70% of the movie are just fucking dope fight scenes. Like that's the other thing that keeps this thing going, is just like these incredible action set pieces that are throughout the entire film.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm not one who likes that necessarily. I mean, I liked it in Old Boy. I liked there's certain fight scenes, but because it was so, even though it wasn't dialogue, it was so grounded in the storytelling, and it was progressing the story. Even in the smallest moments, you could follow what was happening. It didn't feel like fighting for fighting's sake.
No, it's literally a fight to survive, a fight to get to the front, to move from the lower classes into the upper classes. It like always has a purpose.
Well, and you see this, it's this class war struggle, right? We find out later Wilford was like, wow, I didn't anticipate you coming back with the fire. Like you see how based on the knowledge and the planning that each side is organized, right? Like they're planning. This isn't just like a whatever, we're just going to run into the abyss. Like each side, it's a freaking class war.
Yeah.
And so all of those moments have these great like step forward, step backwards, contradictions and progress.
Yeah. And then they do the classic action movie thing of all of the supporting characters that we've come to know and love are, being killed one by one, raising the stakes even higher every time along the way for Curtis and making the losses even more powerful. Also just like a fucking stacked cast. I completely forgot. I was like, Octavia Spencer's here? John Hurt is here?
Yeah.
Jamie Bell?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, damn. And this is like, this is 2014. This is before Parasite. So all these people were like, yeah, I'm going to go do this fucking train movie with Bong Joon-ho in Korea. This is, and everyone is so good.
Mm-hmm.
But then basically, after that fight happens, Tilda's like, it wasn't me. I had nothing to do with it. He executes Tilda on the spot, which I thought was like the right choice. Just in terms of like, you can't trust this person, and they cease to serve a function in terms of advancing this class war.
It's right after the classroom scene.
Oh,
which was
that's
pretty,
right.
Like, this is when you get to see all the kids. They get into this train car classroom with Allison Pill as the teacher, and she's like the brainwashing educator. They're singing these really creepy songs about Wilford and the train, and just you're
Full-on
seeing how
propaganda.
the ideology is like being pushed through the education system. It's full on propaganda. It's really great. And the other thing about Wilford too, I think the choice to not make him a president is really important. Like they could have been like, we're going to get on this train and like recreate a political system or even create a system that is explicitly fascist leader. Like he's their leader, but they refer to, like, he is still the inventor. I think it's another nod to the fact that this is about capitalism, that he's representing this sort of, you don't see like images of him. They don't have like his face in different places the way you would in like a fascist regime where you're all bowing down to a leader. He is this invisible hand, kind of like No Face when we did Never on Sunday. Like I think it's intentional that he is kind of this market force, this capitalist force who's being lauded for his invention, but he's not being treated yet like the way we understand like a fascist leader or a president.
I mean, a little bit in that, like, everyone worships him and, treats him
but
as
everybody
like their
can
savior.
worship like an Elon Musk and like I think that's what's the distinction is like,
Sure, but I mean, I would liken it to Trump.
I think it's much closer to the leaders that we'll see come out of end stage capitalism rather than like even the illusion of like, we voted for him or he he took power. Like they're really worshiping that he is the engine. Like it keeps going back to the engine and the thing he invented and this idea of like this force, which I think is just clarity again about capitalism. And it's not like this is something we've seen in the past. It's kind of all its own.
That's fair. I guess I just like, I was thinking of the way that, like Trump voters just idolize him like he's a fucking god. But you're right. But there is a degree of like, no, we chose him because of what he represents rather than this person came in and saved us. Yeah, that's fair.
And the engine, they keeping like the engine, which is important because from the very top, they're like, no revolution. What is the line? They're like, if we take the engine over, we regain power.
Yeah, the means of production in this case, as this metaphor goes.
Yeah.
So then from here, we start walking through all of the first class cars. So, first we go through like a very Great Gatsby style parlor party into just a straight up like rave nightclub into what is kind of like an opium den for this train, but everyone's doing chronol, which is they explain it. It's like some sort of like engine residue or something that is created by the train that is also like a very powerful hallucinogen, party drug, something.
Yeah, it's like industrial waste. And I think what was interesting about that is that it's the same toxic waste that was originally used to help construct and maintain the train, which I think dramaturgically is important because it ends up being what destroys the train when they make it into a bomb. So I love that internal contradiction.
Yeah. Did you think that there was anything to the chronal storyline, other than it becomes the bomb at the end, but like just its function in this story?
Yeah, I thought the function was that obviously we think of drugs, opium, I think was a great example as like, this is what's being used to placate the masses and help people escape this reality. But really what I liked about it is that you see it's not really so much a part of the first train. Like it's being made, but you don't see like all these people who are in the lower classes just getting high and escaping. It's really like an escape for the bourgeoisie. Like that's where they have the whole chronal train because it's really not that fucking great in this train as they're being forced to believe it is. But it's part of like keeping them escaping from being able to be present to their realities to see that maybe there's an alternative, maybe there is hope. So I thought that was its purpose. And I liked like all these characters, he flips them on their head that were introduced to Namgoon and Yona as like, oh, they're just these drug addicts. And like, yeah, they're like, we're escaping, but they're pivotal in this revolution. And of course, at the end, it's Yona who survives with the small child. And the fact that I think they're using this substance that the train is made from to ultimately destroy the train. It goes back to the metaphor of like, hello, the proletariat makes up society. So it's going to be the proletariat that blows it up. So I think that was the chronal. But I'm curious about, they were hallucinating, but I was just also like, what is this chronal like? But I thought that was the function. I thought it was really an important part of the film.
Yeah, I think I had the same.
And I wasn't expecting it. Like, what a brilliant, of course, a bomb. Yes.
Yeah.
The bomb that liberates them is this drug. So it's like, we can liberate ourselves. And we're also standing in our own way.
Yes.
The thing that will liberate us is often our obstacle. And that's the point of contradiction, is to be able to identify that in order to come up with liberatory solutions.
All right. And then we get to Wilford's car, the very front of the train, the engine, where Wilford is hiding.
Well, before we get
go
there,
ahead.
Maybe we should talk about right before he gets there. This is when he has cannibalism baby monologue.
Oh no, it's outside of Wilford's door. It's like him, It's like him and Namgoon sitting there, and he's like, "Open the door."
That's right. Sorry, I thought you meant inside. This is right before he meets Wilford.
Yeah, right before he meets Wilford. Him and Namgoon are the last two, and yeah, this is
and Yona.
Sorry. And this is when we get the all-time monologue of "I know babies taste best," which I know babies taste best.
While he's smoking the world's last fucking cigarette.
The world's
now,
last
let
cigarette.
me just, that was probably the worst. I was like, if you are smoking the world's last cigarette, motherfucker, shut the fuck up and smoke. Enjoy every fucking
enjoy
pull.
that shit.
He's letting that thing sit and burn the fuck away. I was so distracted by.
No, you're right. He did not appreciate it. And Namgoon says to him, he's like, "You're smoking the world's last cigarette, you tail section swine," or something like that.
And he's like, just lets it sit there and burn through his hand while he tells us this monologue, which is lengthy and
Harrowing.
revelatory, harrowing.
Yeah, where we find out that when they originally boarded the train 17 years ago, they basically locked the tail section passengers in the back with no food. Not basically, that's what they did. They locked them in the back with no food, and it was only a matter of time before cannibalism set in and complete, just absolute, like, tribal violence of people banding together, killing other people to eat them, killing babies, it turns out, to eat them, and how everyone was, including Curtis, we learn, was, making these horrific moral decisions to, sacrifice their humanity for the sake of just being able to eat and go on for another day. And
Yeah, he's quite the line where he has to say, "Do you know what baby tastes like? 'Cause I do," or like something like it was. It was like, oof, rough line to deliver.
rough line to deliver, but it's an acknowledgement that, one, this kind of like suffering and brutalization is something that anyone is susceptible to, even people in lower classes, and that not everyone is able to move through the oppressive forces of this system and come out either unscathed or without having to, or choosing to, make their own like terrible compromises. But also that you can come out on the other side of that with full acknowledgement of the crimes and the absolute horror you've committed, knowing why, and then having it, I guess, I don't know, inform who you become moving forward. Obviously, Curtis feels like tremendous guilt and shame over this, so it's not like he's not just talking about it like, yeah, this should happen. He's like, this is the thing that tortures him the most and probably motivates him to want to enact this change because of the crimes that he committed.
It's a big turning point for the film, and I was just Googling when was Chris Evans Captain America. So he's already been cast. He was cast as Captain America in 2011. And this is where, because I was like, why Chris Evans? That was like a big question mark for me, though, kind of watching them. Like, why Chris Evans? Like, why him? But I think there's like, I think there's a conscious choice that he's Captain America. Like, that's the context in which we're watching it. And I think like you get to this monologue and you realize, A, there's no perfect leaders.
Yes.
He has these fatal flaws. He eats babies.
He knows that they taste best.
I will say that took me, I mean, that monologue took me out a little bit. I understand its purpose. I just felt it was a little clunky in the strike. I just was like, I don't know what, I can't yet figure out what it was, but granted, maybe it was just the cigarette.
He was just so distracted that he was wasting that final cigarette. No, you're right. I thought that some of the dialogue, like I think the line "I know babies taste best" is just a weird way to phrase that.
How is it?
Like
when I was watching with Tommy and he immediately paused and pulled up Austin Powers, it was like, I eat babies, like, fat bastard in that movie. It was like, that's the other monologue where they talk about baby eating.
Yeah.
It was just like,
I gotta say, I do really like Chris Evans in this role, and I
do like him,
and I think that he's a better actor than people give him credit for, and I think a lot of his pre-Marvel work is some of his best, and some of his best work, like films like this, Sunshine. Have you ever seen the Danny?
Well, this is not pre-Marvel.
No, you're right. I guess it's like but it's still at the very beginning. So it's like it's before he's been completely subsumed by the Marvel machine and is like all he is doing is one or two Marvel movies a year. But yeah, like his performance.
Yeah, and he's so hot.
But I think he's very good. I think he's a really.
No, I thought he was good in this, but I guess I was more thinking about like why him in this role. And I do think there's a nod to this is your Captain America. Like, I think that's
Definitely.
so smart. That casting is brilliant because our Captain America is now in this case, this revolutionary leader, like that like you were saying, the circumstances of that entry point. It doesn't matter who you are. This has nothing to do with your human nature. This is what material reality and oppression can do to a person. And that was his journey of, in the revolt and in that revolution. And ultimately, like I saw in that moment, I think it's what happens in the movie. Like he will have to eventually pass the baton to a new leader.
Yes.
I think also like part of his journey is very like daddy, like, and he has to like, he tells this story, and what we learn there is like the elders started cutting off their arms, and then we learn when we meet Wilford that one of the elders who did that was Gilliam. Like,
Yeah, the John Hurt character.
yeah, started this, or Gilliam started this revolution. But that's like clearly he was so in awe of this guy who was like, don't eat babies, eat my arm instead.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, daddy, you know, kind of came under his wing. And then there's like daddy in the back, daddy in the front. It's like, and it's interesting to me, it's these three white men, and it's like his journey from like this daddy to the next daddy. And I love that the movie kind of blows that up, and the two people remaining are this Asian woman and a young black child. And like, I don't know, because I was just like, there's something also about blowing up these patriarchal systems and the intersection of patriarchy with capitalism that I think was another subtext.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And speaking of the top patriarch capitalist, then we actually get into Wilford's cabin, played by Ed Harris. Again, you're like, Ed Harris?
Duh,
fucking
of course.
awesome.
Truman Show.
Yeah, a great.
It's always Ed.
A great role for him is just being like the man behind the curtain. Then we get this great scene between Chris Evans and Ed Harris, where Ed Harris is again, spewing all of the ideology, all of the propaganda. We must always strive for balance, and again reiterates this idea that like this train is a closed ecosystem, and everything that we have done, all of the horrors that you have endured, we did it for the sake of humanity. And then there's I think, my favorite line in the movie. Ed Harris says, everyone has their preordained position and everyone is in their place except you. And Chris Evans says, that's what people in the best place say to people in the worst place. And I thought that's the fucking movie. That's the whole thing right there. And that's capitalism, and that's class systems, and that's how a lot of this is maintained ideologically, is these lies that we are told constantly. We hear it from everyone, from your boss to the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which is like, oh no, we have to inflict all of this pain in the economy. We have to make people unemployed. We have to raise the prices of things. Like, all of this has to happen, because if we don't, then the whole system will fall apart. It's like, well, all right, well, there's still millions of people who can't afford basic necessities, but okay, you're telling me you'd get even worse than this? Okay, great.
Well, and crucially in that scene too, that's where he does the big reveal that Gilliam and him be buddy.
Yeah, collaborators.
That we're working together. We're collaborators. And I thought that was such another brilliant critique of these systems and the contradictions within them. And to me, I mean, I wonder your thoughts, but that was like representing of this, like the incremental change, the reformist, the revolutionary who believes we have to play inside the system. We're going to have to collaborate with the capitalists. Like that's going to sustain us and keep us alive. And it's such I felt so betrayed, and in a good way, as an audience member, because I was buying into like his revolution as well. And so you're just like, feel so let down and shocked in that moment, which is again another crucial contradiction that leads us to the next revolutionary moment when the train blows up.
Yeah. My read on it was that, because we do get a line from Gilliam early on, he like whispers to Tilda Swinton, he's like, I have a message for Wilford, or like, I need to speak to Wilford, or something like that. So like it is confirmed that they do have some sort of pre-existing relationship, some sort of collaboration. My read on it, maybe this was just Ed Harris's acting choice, is that like, yeah, maybe they were in touch. Maybe they talked about some things. Maybe it was like just the one way to communicate. Maybe just Wilford just needed communication between himself and the tail section. So he needed some, just to like, be able to take the temperature on things, see what's going on. So like, essentially Gilliam was like the representative for that. And that maybe Ed Harris was embellishing a little bit all of the things that like he and Gilliam plotted together. Like this idea of like, that was my take. And it's not, again, and it's like, it's not in the text. It's subtext, if anything.
So you think he was sort of like lying about the fact that, like, because he says, I knew your plan of action because Gilliam was basically giving me intel on the revolution. And like what he puts forward is that Gilliam understood from the very beginning that there needs to be a balance of power, that everyone really should be in their place, but Gilliam was kind of working towards, okay, well, let's get the proletariat something to eat. Like he was kind of, to me, it was all about him trying to get incremental change. Let's make the proletariat's circumstances on this train the best as possible. But to me, that was important, because it was like he really believed in the mission to like make it the best as possible by working with Wilford, as opposed to even being able to imagine life outside of the train.
I think,
which I think was his role.
I think both interpretations are valid. I think it could, and I like the ambiguity. I like that you're interpreting it as like Gilliam was a full-on reformist collaborator, and I'm like, well, maybe actually Wilford is just using Gilliam to diffuse Curtis's revolutionary spirit right there at the end. Because at the end, it's just him and him. And what we find out is that, and whether it was actually Gilliam's plan, whether it was just Wilford on the spot trying to figure out a way to like squash this whole revolution, is he's like, Curtis, you will take my place. This is why you are here. We all wanted it to be you. we all wanted it to be you. What is that thing from Next Top Model?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
We were pulling for you.
We were rooting for you.
We were rooting for you. But yeah, so he
I do think.
Go ahead.
I do think the difference. I mean, and I hear you. You can interpret it either way. I just think the value of interpreting it specifically that Gilliam was this reformist. It's like it's a Marxist reading of like the different roles that revolutionary. It's like what you were saying about the older revolution. I think he really bought into you cannot live outside this train. So the best thing to do is like make things better inside of these circumstances, but we have to give up on the idea of changing the material circumstances. And then the film pushes back against Gilliam by saying, oh shit, no, we have to change. The only path forward is change these circumstances or it will remain the same continually. And that actually Gilliam reinforced the system by playing that role.
I think that makes sense. And then I think the film makes the very smart choice of showing that like, because Wilford gives Curtis this whole pitch of like, if you don't take over, all of humanity will die. You don't want all of humanity to die, will you? I mean, you would be a better leader. Like you can be the one that calls the shots. And there's that moment where Curtis has made the decision that he's going to take the gig, and Yona comes in and he pushes her away from him. So he's taken the poison chalice until Yona lifts the floor panel, and we discover that Wilford's been using the small children to keep the engine running. And then that is the thing that like reignites Curtis's revolutionary spirit. And he's like, oh, no. If this level of violence is what it takes to maintain this system, then this whole system just needs to come down because the system is not worth saving. Yeah. And then he like punches Wilford, kills Wilford.
I mean, that also, after all of these fights, you're like, it took one punch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ed Harris hasn't been like, he's just been like chilling in the front for 17 years. He's not like hitting the weights
I know.
or anything.
I love that. I love that it was just that easy. Because all the work was leading up to it. It's just like, okay, oh.
Yep. And then we get to the final ending, which is Namgoon and Yona blowing the door open to just get off the train. Because that's his whole thing the whole time. We think that he's just been collecting this chronal because he's a drug addict. We find out, no, he's actually trying to build a bomb to get off the train entirely. And that is honestly the most...
Because he's putting together a really materialistic form. Like, he's not getting that out of, like, some illusion. He has been looking outside the train every time it passes and seeing this airplane in the snow. And the snow's been melting.
That's right.
So he's like, I see with my own eyes that there is actually a possibility outside of this fucking train, outside of capitalism, for survival and for a different reality.
Correct. So then the bomb goes off. The train derails, an avalanche happens, the train derails, and the only survivors are Yona and the little boy. And the final shot, beautiful final shot, is just them looking at a polar bear, which like on paper should be very anticlimactic, but it felt so powerful at the end of this movie.
So powerful. Well, it was so powerful because to me it was like it wasn't a vague ending. Like the ending was very clear to me, which was his read was right. The big lie was that there wasn't a possibility for anything other than capitalism, and there actually is.
Yeah.
There's like there's other options.
There's other options, and I think we'll get to it in Best Politics in a minute, but that is the most revolutionary idea is like no, let's not get through this system and find ourselves at the top of it and then find ways to reform it like we're saying, but like rather this whole system just needs to come down. This whole thing just needs to burn because it is inherently, just by dint of the way it is organized, is always going to be unjust, unequal, and oppressive. And getting off the train, destroying this system and getting off is the truest form of revolution.
Yes. And I would say if there was any critique, it's like, are these two going to survive? I would say what I learned watching this movie is, okay, it would have been the next revolution. I mean, I don't know if they are going to survive, but would be like getting a group of people to see that plane and understand the material reality of like, no, we could survive, organizing people to be prepared for that so that they could be, because I don't know how prepared that child and that woman is for the fucking, like, yes, there's possibility, but like, also I'm concerned.
They don't have any food. They've only got like these like jackets that the first class passengers were wearing inside. Like, how insulated are they? Like, it's gonna be nighttime soon. Like, I'm also worried for them.
He does make a nod to the Inuit and like the idea that there are these
Sure
alternative, that there are people who have survived, and like maybe if anything, I hope that her dad and her, maybe he gave her, passed on some knowledge, or I don't know, some survival skills, but TBD. The point was made, but I was concerned. I was like, and also could be the end of civilization. But the polar bear is thriving.
Yeah, the polar bear is doing great. All right, should we give some awards for this movie?
Yeah, let's give some awards.
All right. First award, Best Politics. Goes to the character, the Best Politics. I was kind of alluding to this, but I think maybe like Namgun and Yona, because
I agree.
because they understand that like it's not about getting to the front, it's about getting off the train. And we learn that has been their goal from the outset. And it's also smart. They pretend that, or Namgun pretends that he's a drug addict so that no one gets onto his plot, but he's actually just collecting all this chronal to build this bomb.
Right. Yeah, that's my inclination too. But I'll nominate Curtis Everett for the fact that he was a great organizer and also had a very clear, he did have a very clear plan and executed it, and had to make really tough decisions along the way.
Yeah, was willing to die for the cause.
Yeah, and let his best friend get killed too.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, we missed this. That was another big revelation. That was the baby he was going to eat.
That was the baby. That was supposed to be his dinner, turned out to be his best friend. All right, our next award is Worst Politics. Goes to the character with the worst politics.
Wilford.
You think Wilford or Tilda? I guess Wilford, because
Wilford.
Yeah, because like Wilford,
and I think Gilliam. I think they needed each other. Like, I think Gilliam played an important role, got them to a certain section, but also like that's pretty shitty that you were giving intel.
Yeah,
which I believe he was. But Wilford.
I think you're right. But yeah, it's Wilford, because Wilford constructed this whole plane and this whole train, and is the one espousing this like really oppressive ideology. I was gonna say maybe Tilda, but she's just like someone who drank the Kool-Aid, and she's like she's lower level. She's a foot soldier. But you're right. Wilford is the one actually like who created this system.
Yeah. All right. Our last one. This will be fun. Best supporting or character that this movie should actually be about, or maybe I'll expand it to other movies we might want to see, because there's a few. Desperate to know what happens to those two at the end.
Yes.
Also, I want you to write, Frank. I want you to write the next Snowpiercer, but it's on a plane that never lands.
Oh God. Oh, what a nightmare. Yeah, I would write it. It might be like a pretty big ripoff of this movie. Also, there is a Snowpiercer TV show, which I never watched, but it ran for like 4 years.
I never watched either. Wow.
I wonder if I'm sure they explored a lot of this stuff.
Oh shit. I'm intrigued, because I'm like, what do we get answers about the other cars?
Yes, that's what I want. I just want to like spend some time in the other cars. I would be interested in seeing the story of a first class trader, someone who was born into the first class car but recognizes the oppressive nature of the system and their role in it, and maybe fights, maybe wants to collaborate with the tail section to also start the revolution. That would be an interesting. The way they told this story was the correct one, as you said early on, from back to front. But yeah, I'm like, is every single person in first class just like, oh, what a wonderful train that we all get to live on? Or are there some people that are like, this train is kind of fucked up? Anyone else here think that this is a pretty fucked up situation we're all in?
Yeah, maybe one other person who's looked out the window and they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Every time we pass that thing, we see it melting. I love that. There's so many options here. This was fun.
Great movie. Very fun. I think we were nervous about just doing this, the two of us, but like, we had a lot. We got through a lot.
We had a lot. We got more time to talk and still filled it. So,
yeah. Well, thank you all so much for listening. And Riv, as always, wonderful to see you.
Wonderful to see ya.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
For next week, we will be watching Joe Dante's 1990 cult classic, Gremlins 2: The New Batch.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.